Often you start with something that sounds obvious but turns out to be strange once you sit with it. Nowadays, you can call almost anything art, and nobody will stop you. You can hang a quilt in a museum or play recordings of street noise in a concert hall, and someone will write a serious review of it. And every so often, when something especially weird gets welcomed into the world of fine art, people announce of the death of art or of literature or of classical music. Others say, good riddance, one more liberation. So, here's the question. How did we get here? Where did our whole idea of fine art even come from? The claim I want you to take seriously today is this. The modern idea of art is not some eternal truth about human beings. It's not an essence, and it's not destiny. It's something we made. Art as we usually understand it, like painting, sculpture, poetry, and music, grouped together as a special elevated category, is a European invention only about 200 years old. Before that, for over 2,000 years, there was a much broader, much more practical idea of art. And it's entirely possible that a third way of thinking about art is already on its way. So, when critics get anxious and talk about the death of art, they may just be describing the end of one particular social arrangement built in the 18th century, not the end of the world, just the end of a system. But part of what keeps the system invisible is the way we encounter old objects. Museums, symphony programs, literary anthologies, they all quietly encourage us to notice whatever in the past looks most like the present and skip over the differences. Think about Renaissance paintings. We almost always see them framed on a museum wall or floating alone on a lecture slide, but almost none of them were made to be looked at that way. They were altarpieces or panels on wedding chests or images built into the wall of a bedroom. They had a job, they had a place. Same with Shakespeare. We read the plays as timeless masterpieces of literature, but they were working script for popular performance, flexible, changeable, meant for rowdy crowd. Every time we read Shakespeare from an anthology or hear a Bach Passion in a silent concert hall, we reinforce a false impression that people in the past thought about art the way we do, but they didn't. So, let me get into how the split happened, the great division. Here's a clue hiding in plain sight. The word art itself is really important. It comes from the Latin ars and the Greek techne or techne, and both originally meant any human skill at all. Writing verse, making shoes, painting a vase, even governing a city. In that older way of thinking, the opposite of art wasn't craft, it was nature. Art meant anything humans made or did with skill, as opposed to what grew or happened on its own. You can still hear the trace of it when we say the art of medicine or the art of cooking. Then, in the 18th century, the broad idea got split in two. On one side, the fine arts, poetry, painting, sculpture, architecture, music, said to be about inspiration and genius, enjoyed for their own sake. On the other, the crafts and the popular arts, shoemaking, embroidery, storytelling, popular science, said to be about mere skill or rules, meant for use or entertainment. And the two were now supposed to be completely different in kind. Then, in the 19th century, people quietly dropped the word fine. So they dropped the word fine and they just said art and set it against the craft. But the prestige, fine, used to signal didn't disappear. It soaked into the bare word art itself, and it became easy to forget any change had ever happened. This is really important. Two more splits rode along with the first. As art divided from craft, the artist divided from the artisan. Before the 18th century, the words were basically interchangeable. You could call a shoemaker an artist and a painter an artisan. There was really one kind of person, the artisan artist, who made poems and paintings and watches and boots, all by skills. By the century's end, they were opposites. Artists meant the creator of fine art. Artisan, the mere maker of something useful. And a third split, maybe the deepest, pleasure itself. Pleasure itself got divided. A special, refined, contemplative pleasure was reserved for the fine arts and given a brand new name, the aesthetic. While ordinary pleasure in useful or entertaining thing was treated as lower. The scholar M.H. Abrams called this kind of Copernican revolution in the idea of art. In about a century, we went from treating art as something you construct for a purpose to something you contemplate, set apart from any use. I want you to feel how deep this goes, because we're still living inside it, which makes it hard to see. This wasn't just swapping one definition for another, it was swapping one entire system, a whole web of concepts, practices, and institutions for a completely different one. And that new system wasn't just ideals, it was tangled up with power, money, class, and gender. What really broke the old system apart was economic. Patronage gave way to an art market and a middle class public that bought art and could afford to buy artwork. Plenty of people resisted from the start, like Hogarth, Rousseau, Marie Wollstonecraft in the 18th century. All of them pushed back on the divide between art and craft and between art and everyday life. Let me name one more thing before I close, because it's easy to make all this sound cold. There's a dimension I haven't touched. Feeling. Calling art a system of concepts and institutions doesn't begin to capture what people feel through music or film or a novel or painting. Art is something people believe in, a source of comfort, an object of love. So if I tell someone who loves art that the whole idea of fine art is recent and local and shaped by class and gender, it can feel like an attack on something sacred. An artist friend who heard the argument once said, essentially, don't do this. Don't we artists have enough problem already? So, let me be clear. You don't have to be hostile to art to understand where your beliefs about it came from. That honesty isn't an attack. It's the first step toward rethinking the ideals and institutions we've inherited, and maybe imagining what comes next. Okay, What we talked about today is the argument that Larry Scheiner makes in his 2001 book, The Invention of Art, A Cultural History. So, it was the book behind most of what I've said. Scheiner is a philosopher, and the whole book is an attempt to show that the thing we call art, in its current sense, has a birthday.